The world held its breath. Cities from Tel Aviv to Tehran, from Washington to Riyadh, paused in silence as the breaking news rippled across every screen, every network, and every conversation. Iran has agreed to a ceasefire. After weeks of relentless tension, missiles lighting up the skies, and escalating retaliations that brought the region to the edge of all-out war, the Islamic Republic has officially halted its strikes. But this isn't just a headline. This moment is a turning point, a cliffhanger in history where war was just one wrong move away, and now peace is being dangled by a thread. The decision came at midnight, not from a podium, not through a press conference, but in a coded diplomatic channel sent quietly to intermediaries in Oman and Qatar. It was direct. It was urgent. It simply read, all offensive operations paused effective immediately. What led to this sudden reversal? What pressures, what backroom negotiations, what truths hidden behind layers of strategy finally broke through? Because make no mistake, this wasn't a gesture of weakness. This was a maneuver of calculation. Just 24 hours earlier, the skies above Iraq and Syria were filled with smoke. US bases were on red alert. Israeli defense systems were stretched thin. The international community was watching a chain reaction unfold. An Iranian drone strike had hit a logistics hub used by American forces. Casualties had been confirmed. Retaliation was expected. The world was ready for fire. But instead, Iran stepped back. Why? Sources close to Iran's Supreme National Security Council say that the leadership reviewed over a dozen classified risk assessments, each one more terrifying than the last. Scenarios that showed not just economic collapse, but regime-ending scenarios if escalation continued. Internally, the debate wasn't between hawks and doves, it was between survival and legacy. Could Iran hold its head high and still walk away from the battlefield? Could it claim strength while silencing its own missiles? At the same time, pressure was mounting from the streets. In Tehran, candlelight vigils for fallen soldiers transformed into protests. Young voices shouted not for revenge, but for an end. Not for more fire, but for food, for future, for dignity. The slogans changed. Enough blood echoed across districts once filled with chants of defiance, and the leadership heard it. Behind the scenes, diplomacy worked overtime. Russia and China, Iran's allies in the shadows, sent strong signals. Neither wanted a Middle Eastern inferno that could damage oil markets and spark proxy fights on their doorsteps. Meanwhile, European leaders, through backchannels in Vienna, offered Iran what it always needed but never received, an off-ramp. Sanctions relief, phased and conditional, if Iran halted aggression and returned to dialogue. And yet, the ceasefire wasn't just about economics or external pressure. There was a deeper calculus at play. Iran's Revolutionary Guard had achieved its short-term objectives. They had demonstrated capability, they had tested defences, they had rallied their domestic base. To continue now, analysts say, would risk turning strength into overreach. Sometimes restraint speaks louder than rockets. In Tel Aviv, reactions were cautious. Israeli intelligence officials confirmed the ceasefire through multiple intercepts, but warned that it could be a feint. Iran has used pauses before, said one high-ranking IDF source, but to regroup, to reposition, we're not taking anything for granted. Still, the Iron Dome remained operational, but not firing. The skies were quiet. For now. In Washington, President's statement was brief. We welcome the cessation of Iranian strikes. We remain committed to defending our interests and allies. But now is a moment for diplomacy, not destruction. Behind those calm words, however, was a team that had been working for weeks on multiple contingency plans, including worst-case war scenarios that now, maybe, wouldn't have to be opened. But not everyone is celebrating. In the camps of Lebanon and the fields of Yemen, Iran's proxy groups are reportedly furious. They had been preparing for an escalation, stocked with weapons, morale high after symbolic attacks. But now, their Iranian patron is calling them to stand down. This is betrayal, one anonymous militia commander told a regional outlet, and they've abandoned us to save themselves. So what comes next? Ceasefires are fragile. Promises can break in a single second. But this moment, this silence, is historic. It's historic. For the first time in weeks, mothers in Gaza, children in Haifa, and soldiers on both sides are not hearing the sound of war. And for once, perhaps, they can hear the sound of something else, a future, because peace, like war, is a decision, and tonight that decision has been made. But peace does not arrive without suspicion. Across the region, leaders and citizens alike questioned what Iran's real endgame was. Was this ceasefire a true act of de-escalation, or was it merely a pause to recalibrate? Intelligence networks buzzed with movement. Israeli satellites tracked convoys across western Iran. The Pentagon monitored encrypted signals traffic between Tehran and Hezbollah leadership in Lebanon. Something wasn't sitting right. In Iran's parliament, not all were pleased. Hardliners demanded explanations. Some accused the president of surrendering strategic advantage. Others quietly saw an opportunity. By halting now, Iran could reposition itself, not as an aggressor, but as a power that had earned global attention and forced major powers to come to the table. It was, in their minds, a masterstroke. War without losing face, fire without full fallout. Yet among ordinary Iranians, relief was tangible. In Shiraz, families reopened shops. In Calm, religious clerics urged followers to pray for a permanent resolution. And in Tehran, despite warnings, hundreds gathered in Azadi Square, not to protest this time, but to breathe. The fear of being dragged into a war their economy, their youth, and their future could not afford had lifted. For now, inside Israel, however, doubts hardened into strategy. Prime Minister convened his war cabinet in a late-night session. "We cannot be deceived by silence," he said. "We must be vigilant. Prepare for the next move, because there will be one." Within hours, IDF launched surveillance drones deeper into Iranian airspace than ever before. Not a single missile was fired, but the message was clear: we're watching. American officials echoed similar caution. Secretary of Defense met with CENTCOM leadership in Doha. "We're not pulling back yet. Deterrence isn't just about weapons, it's about presence. And our presence in the Gulf remains non-negotiable." Naval fleet stayed in position. Fighter jets remained armed. The region wasn't stepping down. It was merely holding its breath between storms. In the shadows of this fragile pause, smaller nations played diplomatic chess. Oman intensified its role as mediator. Qatar opened confidential lines with both Iran and the US. Turkey, always seeking relevance, offered to host renewed talks. And Saudi Arabia, previously silent, issued a cautiously worded statement. All regional actors must now choose stability over escalation. Coming from Riyadh, that line echoed like thunder. Yet what changed Iran's mind was not just pressure or diplomacy. It was a realization, however bitter, that their missile campaign had reached its ceiling. Precision strikes were matched by precision retaliation. Every drone launched came with a price. Oil prices surged. Currency markets panicked. And while Iranian generals claimed tactical wins, their people were paying in silence, scarcity, and fear. The Mossad, Shin Bet, and IDF intensified cyber operations, probing for signs of deception. "We have no illusions," said one official. "Iran may have paused their missiles, but their ideology, their long-term ambition, it remains unchanged." And yet, even Israel found itself facing an unexpected reality. The war they had anticipated was now off the table. What comes next may be more dangerous, a war fought not with bombs, but with perception, influence, and patience. The United Nations moved quickly to capitalize on the moment. A resolution was drafted, calling for a formal freeze of hostilities, opening corridors for humanitarian aid, and reinitiating talks around regional arms control. While the resolution lacked the teeth to enforce compliance, its symbolism was profound. It signaled that the world was watching and hoping. In the background, oil markets stabilized, the price per barrel dipped slightly, global stock markets rebounded. Investors who had braced for the worst exhaled. But among the cautious optimism, deep questions lingered. Was this truly the end of the storm, or just the eye? In Iran's border regions, military units were observed retreating to defensive formations. Artillery and mobile launchers were hidden again. Not dismantled, just parked. Ready. Waiting. It sent a clear signal to both allies and enemies. We're pausing, not disarming. This is a ceasefire, not capitulation. Meanwhile, young people across the Middle East reacted in their own ways. On social media, Iranian and Israeli youth alike began reaching across digital divides, like #NoMoreWar and #PeaceIsPower trended briefly on TikTok and Twitter. A viral video showed an Iranian and an Israeli student discussing their fear of war and their shared hope to just live. It was a moment of human vulnerability that pierced through years of political hatred. And though such moments don't change governments, they do change conversations, and conversations can change history. But Iran's pause also forced questions within its own military establishment. Had they blinked too early? Had they lost momentum? Or had they made a genius move by pivoting just before their enemies could unite against them? Inside the Revolutionary Guard, debates raged behind closed doors. One commander reportedly said, "Well, we showed the world what we could do. And now we've shown we can stop doing it." That is real power. But even power has limits.